Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Priceless Advice. I am delighted this time to feature a guest that we've known about each other for almost 10 years. We'll talk about that. But welcome, Adam Janes, CVA and current president of Volunteer Management Professionals of Canada. Adam, welcome to the show.
Thank you. And as you're saying, long time coming. And I will confess, was tempted to. You've always been very open with, hey, if you want to come on, tap me on the shoulder. And I'm sure I've drafted a few emails along the way, and I just never got to hitting send along the way. And this time, I was like, you know what? Probably the third time thinking about it, it's like the charm. So had to get together and have this happen.
It,
And
it,
yeah, so.
yeah, it's fate, it's destiny, it's synchronicity, it's the universe of our busy schedules aligning finally. And I'm glad to have you on the show and get your priceless advice and some of your Tuesday tips. And I want to also get into, since you're now the president of VMPC, I am a past president of our USA equivalent Alive, Association of Leaders in Volunteer Engagement. VMPC and Alive still work very closely together. For example, the Volunteer Management Leadership Hybrid Conference that we just had in October. It typically happens in middle-ish, late October. And, you know, your path to becoming president of VMPC, I followed your career for a while, but what got you into this career in general? Were you a little kid sitting there like, I'm going to run volunteer programs one day? How did your hopes and dreams come true?
Oh, I love telling the good origin story for sure. And I think it all goes back, and I trace it further and further back for different themes and kind of like as you figure out how to be a human. So in the real time in professional speak, I was a program leader at a local charity here in Ottawa. We ran recreational weekday, after school programs, weekend programs, and summer camp for children in economically disadvantaged communities. And awesome organization, very disorganized. Organized, disorganized. Each program leader had to go and find their own volunteers, onboard their own volunteers, train their own volunteers, and work with their own volunteers, all while trying to maintain the program. And a big piece of that was, as we all know, in the volunteer engagement world, it's more complex once you start getting into it. And so I was successful in getting some volunteers, but it was always a bit of like, oh my goodness, wouldn't it be amazing if there was somebody that kind of brought this all together, created a system and a structure? And I kind of talked to a few colleagues, to my supervisor at the time. I was like, I kind of really enjoying inviting people and getting them involved. And so I was like, can I just pitch a volunteer coordination position? And so I put my hand up, I wrote a job description, I pitched it. I said, I'll even work part-time on my past job to make sure that person's well supported. Like we'll see, make it all happen. And they went for it. And then as soon as I got it, I was like, oh my gosh, this is a career and there's so much to do. And ever since it's been an enthralling journey of learning and engaging and connecting and so many things I didn't even realize were part of volunteer engagement that I'm still learning to this day. I'm sure we'll come across some of those topics as we chat. But now looking back, it was even before that. In the previous, I ran youth programs in the past. I was a youth pastor, and I realized that like that passion of developing community was attached to why volunteer engagement is so enthralling. Asking people like the distilled it down to like, I like helping people. I want to help people in my career. And then volunteer engagement, if you distilled it down to a sentence, it's you're helping people help people. And so at a very simple way, there's so much more, again, there's so much more complexity to it, but those kind of markers really tied into kind of like, oh wow, this is a career that I can really feel fulfilled in. And there's so many great people that are open to talking to. I was just chatting with somebody earlier, and one of the things we were talking about is how willing people are to chat about the profession. And I feel like there's a bit of that. Nobody has this all figured out yet, so let's all keep talking about it, keep trying things, keep engaging. As we know, we take on this task of developing volunteer communities, we're developing that leadership of volunteering community. So took its steps from there.
And that's, everyone who is a leader of volunteers has their own heroic origin story. Yes, and I find that being a program manager or program coordinator or director is one of the common lateral moves into this career, because it is a career, and it doesn't, and yet also most universities, there's a couple in the States and I think a couple in Canada, have, do not have a major or a career path that you can easily identify going into volunteer
Yeah.
engagement. There's often, nonprofit management or public administration degrees and things like that. There's a lot of pathways to get to expertise, and you happen to have your CVA. I happen to have my CVA. A
Yeah.
lot of our friends are CVAs and certified in volunteer administration, and that's a really, to me, a really good shorthand of like, oh, somebody knows what they're doing, and it's a great way to add more alphabet soup to the end of your name with any other any other accolades. But going from program design to volunteer management, one of the things we were talking about getting ready for this conversation was that such a wide breadth of perspectives on how to do volunteer engagement. And
Yeah.
even though we're rightfully going away from describing it as best practices, because then it gets down to, well, who is it best for? But, some of the kind of classic models of volunteer engagement, some come from 60s Mad Men style marketing funnels, or you're funneling someone into a call to action, and marketing and
Yeah.
that aspect is a part of it. Like you said, this gets very complex. But what were some of the early good pieces of wisdom from colleagues or advice
Yeah.
that you got to kind of build up how you approach volunteer engagement yourself, even previous to being the president of VMPC?
Oh yeah, it's been a journey. So like I call my first year in volunteer engagement like the volunteer hustle. I didn't know what I was doing. I was just connecting with people, going for coffee, really just trying to like feel out the environment of where people wanted to connect, right? And so it was fairly engaged volunteer engagement. You're working with kids, leading programs. So I wanted to know the volunteers before I'm like, yep, you can volunteer with these children. Like it was very intensive. And so I learned very quickly on that front that, this volunteering is very particular. I'm now at a food bank where you're mostly rearranging and inspecting food, very important, but not quite as intensive as, the guardrails aren't quite as careful and thoughtful of being, is this the right person to be a mentor to these children, right?
Right.
It's so volunteering as I've come along has been so diverse, you know what I mean? And then that in part to leading volunteers is so diverse because what volunteering looks like is as broad as helping, right? It's as broad as how do we as humans give some of our time to improve, something in our environment or people's lives in our environment. So early on, I think I started a lot of trial and error, and I think many of us start there. And it's maybe a bit of one of my points. Look at two later is it's are other people doing that trial and error and then finding it frustrating and giving up in the profession
Right.
and moving back into programming or into something else. But what I found is then I caught a few aha moments along the way. So one of them was, oh, I have a local association of volunteer engagers. And oh, there's people that know what I'm going through and what I'm experiencing, the wins and the losses and the struggle. And so that was a key one. So I started going and, I had that first feeling of like, I don't know anybody here. It's going to be awkward, but I showed up anyway. I was like, some wisdom early on, pre even volunteer engagement was if you're going to be successful in the not-for-profit, you need to network because it's a
Right.
very small
Always.
community of people, relatively speaking. So as you get to know people, they know people and you'll connect to more and more people. And then you'll have that net of people that you know, and that really will and has proven to be one of the most important pieces. So yeah, that was one of the first ones is network. And then the other one was don't give up when it's awkward. Like don't give up just because you don't feel comfortable yet when you have a sense that something's going to be really valuable.
The
So I
best way out
local
is through.
AVA,
Yeah.
yeah, and
Yeah.
and then I started attending workshops at the volunteer center and just seeing what those had to offer. And then, a couple years later, I started leading those workshops and started used my experience and my trial and error and learning to teach others and get that engagement. So I think really connecting and networking and seeing how you can like strengthen those different relationships as you see them kind of come into fruition. And yeah, so it was attending AVA meetings and then joining the board and finding a role to help that AVA grow. And the same with the Volunteer Ottawa, like attending workshops and then getting to know the person who's, the education coordinator and seeing how you can connect and add things to what they're doing and kind of create that next step of engagement. And yeah, it's really cool. And then somebody on the OLV, the local board, is also on the VMPC board, and they say, "Hey, you really seem to be loving this stuff. There's going to be an advocacy position on the VMPC board. Are you interested in it? I could, put your name forward." And you're like, "Oh, that sounds really cool. I'm really interested in advocacy because I've been learning about volunteering and government policy and how there's an extreme lack of it, and I'd like to speak to that." And so you make these connections, and it weaves a level of engagement that you find your way, and then all of a sudden you're sitting at a meeting, get someone taps you on the shoulder and be like, "Would you be interested in taking the vice presidency and moving to the presidency?" I was like, "Oh my goodness."
Sure. I think
Let me
so.
just
Yeah.
catch my anxiety before I run away. You see that little cloud of smoke of the
Hmm.
outline of
Poof.
the person as they've
Hmm.
disappeared.
The cartoon
But
poof of smoke of dust. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. But I think in that presence, though, it was the people and the network and the connection you made because Lindsay Baker, who's a past president of
Yep. Love
VMPC,
Lindsay.
when I
Good pal.
started, I started going to her webinars, and she was a webinar facilitator. She coordinated, hosted, made sure she had time to chat with and connect with anybody that was there that had any questions. And so we developed a rapport and connection. And so when I joined the board, she was on as president and about to be past president. And we had great conversations about, where VMPC is going, what's happening. So it's all kind of like that connectivity, that networking, and really building those relationships makes.
Yeah, and building relationships that's the foundation of nonprofit work in general and volunteer engagement, development, of course. And I love hearing about your eureka moment. I call it epiphany or moment of discovery where and I had mine a few years into my career as well, where like, oh, not only is this a profession, there are professional associations, there are local associations, there's a
Yeah.
national association, there's IAVE, there's the global international
Yeah.
association that I can belong to. Oh, there's a thing called a CVA I can belong to, and
Yeah.
if my channel and my work for the last decade or more of kind of being a speaker and a known person in the sector, I hope that anyone takes away that you don't ever have to start from scratch. Like you said, you were kind
No.
of like hustling and finding, and that was kind of my first year too. I was like, well, what is this all? Entry level volunteer
Yeah.
coordinator with Project Open Hand, food delivery service for chronically ill people in the early 2000s, and it's like, oh, this is a whole thing. And
Yeah.
you talked about hitting that there's that eureka moment of, oh, this is a profession and I have support. But there's
Yeah.
absolutely a drop off, and Toby Johnson, volunteer pro, another great friend and colleague, and sister of red hair, has she's skipping doing her survey this year,
I
but in
know.
previous
Yeah.
but in previous surveys, she's proven with data that there's about at 3 to 5 years in, people drop off. They either This is a stepping stone, they get burned out, you don't get
Yeah.
rich doing this kind of work. It's not
Hmm.
a get rich quick scheme by you really have to love it and love the people and love
Yeah.
what you're doing to stick with it to get into more than 10 years. And then there's a lot of people who are 10 years plus. So there's this
Yeah.
middle career point
Yeah.
where we potentially lose a lot of colleagues. And I think if we can all work on that advocacy safety net and get the
Yeah.
information out there that there is more to learn if you're interested, and it's okay if your career goes in a completely different direction and being a
Yeah.
volunteer coordinator was just part of it. And yes, and if you do want this to be your career, what you put into learning from your colleagues, you more
Yeah.
than get that back. You get it back many, many times over in learning from each other and always staying curious. And there's always more to learn. There's new
Yeah.
ideas coming. There's colleagues who write books. Someday I'll get my book out. Don't know when. I stopped making promises about it when COVID hit.
Yeah.
But there's so many ways to get to this career, and there's, like we talked about at the beginning of the conversation, there's a lot of different systems of
Yeah.
approaching volunteer engagement. Have you found one that, and they all work differently. Something
Yeah.
with a food bank is going to work differently than something in, human services, and something in, animal support services, or, doing deep research. Like, that's all going to need a slightly different approach.
Yeah.
I've developed my three C's, comfort, thinking about people's comfort, convenience, and connection, and that can be as simple or complex as you want it to be. But there's a lot
Yeah.
of others, and you put a
Yeah.
little list together. Or do you want me to read out the list that we brainstormed of the
Off the
different?
top of my head, yeah.
And everybody, watching this, put in the comments if you hear something you've never heard before on this list,
Yeah.
or if you have something that you want to add to it. But community building, community centric approach, which hopefully all of them have a piece of that, and these can overlap for sure. Data driven and informed, strategic initiatives and directives, driving volunteer engagement, formal versus informal versus semi-formal frameworks, because again, what research there is about volunteering, which is usually not enough, shows that typically around the world, 70% is informal volunteering, where
Yeah.
people aren't identifying with a specific organization, even if they're sharing a cause and sharing some tasks together. The 5 R's, the classic 5 R's: recruit, retrain, recognize, retain, and retire. Martin J. Cowling used to have, I think, like 6 S's or 7 S's, and it was, support. So, and I came up with the 3 C's. It's easy to come up with, well, not easy, but it's common to come up with letters to help people kind of remember some of the
Yeah.
basics. And then the dreaded volunteer management cycle, which makes it sound like we're doing laundry. So that's kind of like a blast from the past of
Yeah.
kind of like a classic way to do it. State by standards of excellence, always a good measure. Knowledge competency framework, getting the best
Yeah.
fit for people. And then also just all of the other issues that come up in volunteer engagement around, ethics and guidelines, risk assessments, screenings. Like you said, it's a very different screening process for someone working with kids or families or elders or any kind of legally considered vulnerable populations than it is with
Yeah.
a drop-in group at a food bank, organizing groceries, or even,
Mhm.
chopping carrots to cook into meals, like I had volunteers do with Project Open Hand. And there are many different kinds of shiny volunteer management software and development
Yeah.
software that all claim they're going to solve all your problems. And
Yeah.
again, I do a brand neutral approach. I've worked with a lot of volunteer management
Yeah.
software
Same.
companies. I know most of the founders. You've done the same thing. We've worked closely with, Better Impact and those folks over the years, not just in the hybrid conference, but in other work. And I don't know, my approach has been that, other than the 3 C's, which apply to everyone all the time, everywhere. But all these things do overlap, and they should
Yeah.
inform each other. And you should be not constantly changing so that it's, inconsistent or unsteady. But you should always be thinking about what else can I learn about this that makes me a better leader of volunteers. Like, do you have some favorites? You don't have to say the 3 C's just because you're on the show. But
It was one of the first ones
one of the first ones. Yeah,
it was
yeah.
it was a medicine against the 5 R's, right?
Yes,
Because
yeah,
I got
pretty much.
inherited the 5 R's somewhere along early on, and like ED loved the 5 R's because he could in one sentence kind of be like, "And here's what Adam does," and I was like,
Yeah.
"Well,
Ooh,
not
ooh,
really," but
yeah.
I think over the years it's kind of like choosing what you need along the way. I think it's the
Right.
best way to say what I've had, and like I think as we get in more comfortable in our roles, we kind of learn how to have things at the ready, but not lean on them and like be kind of role based and be like, oh,
Hmm.
I follow these rules. These is my guidelines that I follow. It's more like I understand, the body of knowledge out there, and I really lean into which, you have a great bookshelf behind it, which novel I need to come and research for a particular situation, which chapter of which book, and which person's advice really. So I think it's a really big collective. I think what it kind of ties into for me, though, it seems like that the marrying of knowledge, wisdom, and practice. I think like as long as you can find like all those three things in what you're doing. So like the knowledge side is like the data informed, like empirical, like evidence. You don't want just to live in I feel land. But there's a wisdom too. There's a gut feeling. And so coming to the food bank was a great story because Joanne, who's been the manager there now for 15 years, had a huge volunteer program she was running by herself, and like that alone is an act of of uh, of epic
Department of
proportions.
One. Yeah, Department of
Yeah,
One. Yeah.
and like many moving parts, volunteer pro, and like knew exactly what needed to be said and how it needed to be shared with the community to make it continue it and run it and be able, but then a wish list on the side of things like I could never get to or validate or be able to. And so when I got there and our skill sets really aligned really nicely as a team of two, I did a lot of that. Oh, you the things you're describing and you're feeling, like here's some data and some metrics and some ways to describe, the realities, the evidence based of what you feel, what you know, and what you were sharing out of your, out of your knowing, of your seeing. But now we also have these metrics, and so having both the wisdom and the knowledge together, which helps then inform your practice. And so I find those three things, and then all of the pieces the other ways to describe it or the other resources can fit into helping that. That's kind of where I've started to lean on is like, okay, are we balanced in like going with our gut, also being evidence-based? And so now I've been at the food bank almost 3 years, and I know bucking some of the trends, our team has been able to evaluate our program. We did an audit of our program based on the Canadian Code for Volunteer
Mhm.
Involvement. We advocated that since volunteering has always been an essential part of the organization, that we should have a statement of volunteering that the board agrees on and signs off on. So we've gotten that as part of what we're doing so that it's not just what the volunteer program says that values volunteering. It's not Joanne having to be the only advocate, that the whole organization actually has been agreeing and we'll share that volunteers are an essential part of what we do. So like there's been some really great moments like that, but we also advocated that the amount of work that needs to be done to sustain and bring this program into the future needs 3 people in the staff team. And
Yeah.
we had the data and the level of engagement to validate that. So in a good news, bad news story, food insecurity is getting worse in Ottawa and many parts of North America, but we have resources to be able to hire people to be able to combat food insecurity in the day to day while we work at advocating for systemic change, at other levels. With the knowledge, maybe not. With just the wisdom, maybe not. But with the two and a strong practice, we were able to advocate and now can continue to work on our practice because we've been able to not just share that we feel we need a new person, but be able to both share that we feel that need, prove that we have that need, and also show what we can do with the resources. So it's a
Yeah.
it's a great proof case of like the balance of those having those things and being able to utilize. And we're excited because now we can take on new projects and actually make an impact deeper than we could if we just were staying where we were.
And that's such an important thing to do in any organization is attach the data that you have about volunteer activities, decide
Yeah.
what you don't know, what you want to know. A needs
Yeah.
assessment's a good start. I'm very envious that Canada does have code for volunteer engagement. I wish the states had something like that. I know there's also been recent pushback and articles from colleagues about, is that national code out of date already? And how
Yeah,
how how
it
can
is.
you, yeah, and it's like I think it was
The
updated
next
in
version is in process,
2017. Yeah, next
thankfully. Yeah.
version's in
Yeah.
process, but it was some years ago that it was last
Oh
done.
yeah.
And that you do have to kind of keep up with what's going on. That doesn't mean that, again, there's no solid foundation, but creating that solid foundation on attached volunteer metrics to the results that the organization and the agency are already looking for. What are their milestones and
Yeah.
metrics of success? How does volunteer services directly support that? And then you
Yeah.
can get that higher strategic, more orbital level of, oh, we can do so many other things. We made the case that we need 3 staff people when we get priority funding for this. You get a return on volunteer investment that, again,
Yeah.
most executive directors or general managers of organizations don't even know that that's a thing. That they think,
Yeah.
oh, there's the too often attitude of, oh, volunteers are free, it's free labor.
Yeah.
And so to do that kind of
No.
educating up and managing up, what have been some of your success stories? You talked about, making the case when being at the food bank for a few years and coming out of kind of, family programs and services. What's helped you make the case to get those staff positions, and what specific data were you attaching or showing in the organization's metrics that helped convince the higher ups that should be a priority?
Gonna get into the nitty gritty a bit,
Yeah.
but definitely. When we started, the first thing is like we classically, like most programs, because of whether it's grants or just making sure that people understand you're busy and have enough work, we had number of hours, number of programs, number of volunteers that we're
The
helping. But
basics.
then
Yeah.
it kind of ended there. It's kind of like, this is what we have. And I kind of was chatting with Joanne. I'm like, these are great. And we've always shared the stories of the impact, which is the other piece that's really great. But then there's the third piece, which is like the metrics, the the where you find that kind of like linkages and evidence of like more happening than meets the eye, right? So the
Hmm.
some of the key pieces that I found is that we did a full scale, like not just who's volunteering and how many hours they're giving, but how many people are interested in volunteering with us, how many people sign up,
Right.
how many people show up, how many people keep coming, right? And so this full journey. And so one of the biggest pieces that we learned is that twice as many people were coming ready to volunteer with us, even giving us their sign up information and never taking a shift. So we're like, okay,
Hmm.
so there's one major project that we need to work on is we need investment to steward and foster and utilize, and I call it improving our welcome. We need a
Hmm.
better welcome for people because they're showing that they want to volunteer with us. We need to take that notion, that gesture from them as seriously as they're giving us their time and willingness and potential time. We need to have a system that engages them, and that's a lot of people. Like there's a large amount of people that want to come this way, and if at worst we have the enough information to suggest where else to volunteer, and then that improves volunteering as a whole, and we enrich the larger volunteer involved environment, especially in food insecurity, where we have network partners. That's a win because one of our strategic goals is improving the network and helping the
Hmm.
network and engaging them. So that was one piece of it. So we were able to show and prove that yes, we have this many volunteers, this many hours, but there's this many more people that we're leaving on our doorstep. And talking about development, if you had 1,500 people wanting to donate to your organization and you didn't give them enough time or attention, you could better believe there'd be a number of people running to that door to answer it, right? Because, oh my goodness, look at all these. And so that was really one of those key moments of like, interesting. And we're able to look back and say that, and even more people don't even sign up with us who show interest that kind of get lost in our website or
Hmm.
lack of updated information or
Yeah. Too many
and all those
clicks or
things.
they get frustrated
Yeah,
or,
all,
yeah.
all those things volunteer managers are like, I would get there, but there's so many needs in the actual having our volunteers rightly placed and prepared for their activities, right? So that
Hmm.
that was the first one. The other one was helping like dispel myths, right? So like volunteer reliability, we were able to start tracking our fulfill rate. So and in our core volunteers, they're actually at par with paid staff. They show up as just as much as they're very good at saying if they're sick, they cancel and they let us know. Like their rates were extremely high. And even at an organizational level, we canceled more volunteer shifts on volunteers than they canceled on us at an aggregate level.
Oh,
And
wow.
so I was actually go back kind of tongue in cheek, but kind of showing an important point that we're actually more reliable, that our volunteers are more reliable to us than we are to them in a way, because, we have all these shifts and we do them by our needs and our ability and our capacity, but sometimes things happen and we have to cancel a shift, right? And so we started tracking that. And so we kind of put them next to each other and said, whole and whole, life happens about 10% of the time to people. And we have to understand that there's some grace and flexibility. But if you wanted to look at reliability, like the volunteer program and systems that we developed help people to be reliable. And so that was another one that was really, really valuable to them. And then that kind of proves that, properly engaging and investing volunteers to come join us in a way that is reliable will help them be reliable. So that's another place that takes time and effort to make a reliable system that is well thought out and planned and communicated. And so that was another piece of the puzzle. I think the third one was this idea of opening the eyes that volunteering doesn't just have to happen the way it's always happened,
Hmm.
that a volunteering program can come from your mission statement into action through new channels, through new departments, through new people. So we were able to grow the program into unique, smaller opportunities in each department. So now that every department at the food bank has at least one volunteering opportunity every year. And so it's really neat to see that diversity come, so that we have program and planning volunteers, we have operations volunteers, stewardship volunteers, administration volunteers, farm volunteers, delivery volunteers. So across the whole organization, there's volunteers involved alongside staff in a large variety of ways. And so that opening up of possibilities, and then knowing that means investing in training staff and encouraging supervisors and volunteers to have more skill and ability to foster relationships with the volunteers that they have in their care.
Yeah, and the importance of sharing these specific, like you said, getting into the nitty-gritty, how you've specifically lined up the metrics with the organizational goals and the milestones and the community goals of building these partnerships. I've done a really popular workshop the last few years of the road to retention that basically is that journey mapping
Yeah.
of where no matter what, whether you're using volunteer management software or not, although it can be
Yeah.
easier with software than just Excel sheets, but just like, did 100 people apply and 10 people made it to the first shift? Why is that? And opening up
Yeah.
that conversation and getting maybe information that might be uncomfortable or a surprise to hear, and just treating it with an emotional neutrality of like, this is information, this is data that we need to have
Yeah.
in order to create updates or opportunities. Or we notice that, yeah, it takes people 5, 10 clicks to dig through our website and figure out what the current
Yeah.
volunteer things are, and they're not updated, and can I get in touch with IT or communications or the person who does that. That really diverse relationship building supports all of the data, and then that feeds into making the case for, and 3 full-time people need to do this or it doesn't get done.
Yeah.
And very often, especially in food banks or organizations where there's a lot of opportunity for corporate or community group episodic
Yeah.
to drop in, that there can be this idea of, well, we want to convert the drop-ins to be regularly occurring volunteers. Yes, and I
Mhm.
love that your program specifically has said, yeah, volunteers can do these other things. It's
Yeah.
not only the basics you think about in a food warehouse or food insecurity organization or doing groceries or putting meals together. There's all
Yeah.
these other leadership committees and positions that volunteers can help with that outreach and that recruitment. And I want people to really let that sink in. If you're not already doing these types of things with your organization, start somewhere. Start somewhere
Yeah.
with getting the data that is attached to the rest of the metrics that the organization wants to report out, and that
Yeah.
was proven with research in 2022, 2023 with the Initiative for Strategic Volunteer Engagement, which now lives with independent sector, but was started with the National Association for Volunteer Engagement, kind of setting up that initiative and that research, that when you can make the case to funders
Yeah.
that, and like you said, 1,500 people are showing up to want to do something, there's a huge overlap between donors and volunteers anyway. Let's
Mhm.
make sure that we understand that prioritizing volunteer engagement is at least as
Yeah.
important as donor engagement, because they're often the same people, and good community engagement benefits all departments,
Yeah.
benefits the agency in every way to create those relationships. And
Yeah.
even beyond how we do the job, it you were talking about getting ready for this conversation, like it leads back into not just the how, the what, and the why, but who is here within your organization, who supports leaders of volunteers, not just the professional networks, but who have become your
Yeah.
champions at the food bank. When you kind of showed them this information, did you see their epiphanies or their eureka moments of like, oh, now I like, what was that light bulb click in moment that you got to witness when you made the case?
Yeah, there's been some neat different stories coming up in the different departments when somebody like maybe hasn't worked with volunteers before and then they start and you're kind of coaching them along like how it works, what are the things that are appropriate, what are not. And one of the really great ones is our admin volunteering, because we have a paid admin staff, but they have meetings, they have a lunch break, they have times, and then that leaves our reception area empty. And so we talk to our volunteers coming in and be like, this is a really interesting role because at the heart of it is that we want to make sure there's always a welcoming, caring person in our reception area, no matter who comes through the door.
Mm-hmm.
And then secondarily, there's all kinds of other odds and ends tasks that, are really helpful to get done in an efficient and effective way. And so having this volunteer role, like working together in tandem, really having a staff and a volunteer working together and having that as a team just created this sense of peace for some of our other staff, especially on a day where things are a little hectic or hairy and things are going, having that extra person that cares and knows who we are in our organization and can talk to somebody about who we are and where to get help if they need help and that kind of thing just means the world. Like, so that not just the practical of like, oh, they can do some tasks. It's that peace of mind of having a larger community support that particular area, right? So it's really neat to see our office manager kind of being like, I love having volunteers in this role. And, proof is in the pudding that the office manager loved it so much. She tapped her mom on the shoulder to come and try it out and
Mom,
be
this
an
is for
admin
you.
volunteer.
You know it's
Such a
a
good
you,
experience when, yeah.
yeah, you know it's a good experience when they're bringing mom in to, if it passes the mom test, you've done a really good job.
Yeah.
Someone
Right.
recruiting family for that. Speaking of motivation, we've talked about your motivation and helping to motivate and educate up. You said the office manager was like, "Yay, I'm going to bring mom in to do this." Volunteers are doing such a great job in this. And how do you keep your own motivation? Because there's a lot of food security. It's getting worse
Yeah.
before it gets better. I think that's a fantastic goal that, by 2050, no one in Ottawa is food insecure. I wish that was, there were goals like that were solid and in place more throughout the United States and North America and other Canadian provinces and cities. So when you're having a down day, maybe the weather and the chill gets you down. It doesn't feel motivating. What's something that you can do to motivate yourself that might help motivate other leaders of volunteers when it seems like we're in the darkness of the world gets starts to creep in a little too much?
I try to go back to the theme that a lot of people sharing that the landscape is changing. Like there's a lot of unknowns out there. So I do like leaning into what we do know, so that the sense that I do know that a lot of amazing volunteers show up every day, consistently. Some of our volunteers are weekly and they've been here for, a decade or more, and they're just so dialed into knowing that these small acts make a difference. So they stand as a huge motivator to me, and sometimes you take that for granted, the little things and the consistent actions, and that you know most of the world is doing good most of the time, and there is a lot of good in the world, and it's cheesy, but my favorite movie out there is Lord of the Rings, and one of the quotes is
Yay.
that there's still some light in this world, and it's worth fighting for, and so. On days where it isn't quite so sunny out, I kind of think back to the good things, the small good things people are consistently doing, and that kindling those motivations in myself and others to want to turn that into a bit more of a roaring fire through the small acts of kindness and goodness and caring for those that giving the time to care for those. I think in the digital world, it's so easy just to click a thumbs up or a heart, and when volunteering really is that actual act of heart or thumbs up, in the sense that you're kind of putting it into real life versus the virtual world. So
Yeah, that high touch that we want to make sure doesn't get lost in the high tech,
yeah,
and especially more and more organizations thinking that some sort of generative AI can help them or not, and that's
yeah,
my position is pretty clear. I mean, I'm in the heart of Silicon Valley, and I've talked
yeah,
about the words AI or the initials AI means so many different kinds of programs.
yeah,
And so many different things depending on who you're talking to. But I think that not ever losing that human touch, and it's often called human centered. We've talked about that on the show before.
yeah,
And that personal connection that even in a food bank environment where when I was with, Project Open Hand, we were three of us back in the day, were managing thousands and thousands of people every day.
yeah,
So in an environment or at a scale where if someone's leading volunteers and they're not going to meet 5,000 people individually,
no,
how do you maintain that high touch, or do you just you sounds like you are good at making the time and having those volunteers that are more reliable than maybe staff or the agency itself, also being part of that network and part of that community
yeah.
connection. But what are I'm curious how that fits into not just the philosophy of your own motivation, but and keeping the motivation for volunteers is looking for the helpers, like the Mr. Rogers thing and the Lord of the Rings, like
Yeah.
Mr. Frodo, there is some good in the world, and we're going to do it, and being the
Yeah.
Samwise to all
Yeah.
the Mr. Frodos of the world, and keeping that motivation, and having that be, part of the success story. I think it's important to tie how you're motivating yourself as a leader of volunteers
Yeah.
and motivating the other staff members to understand this and motivating volunteers themselves. Do you think you could bottle that and sell it on the internet for your colleagues? Other than what we're talking about today, can you just stuff a little bit of that in the bottle with maybe a little Ottawa snow and send it out?
No, I think again, it's in the time together, and
Hmm.
I keep going back to that. Like that's what's made my career, spending time with amazing leaders of volunteers, both validating the trial and error that I was doing, but also learning new things, getting inspired, getting encouraged.
Hmm.
I know that's a very encouraging field, and there's some people that I know I go to this day when I'm feeling like, is making the right choice? I need a little encouragement on some of the decisions that we're thinking about, And so I think spending time together, not thinking that there's any one way right way. I think that goes
Hmm.
back to all those systems. It's not like this way is better than that way or this way. I think our understanding of all these systems gets filtered into who we are as people and connects. So I think it really is in that sense of being a community. And even from a young age, the community meant so much to me, right? It meant like being part of something where you belong and having autonomy in that circle, right? So I think I carry that through whatever I'm doing, no matter where it is, whether it's how I raise my kids to what I do at work. And like the food bank was a challenge. And similar, you probably felt this early on in your career. It's like, how do I build community in a warehouse, right?
Right.
It's like, and
With
then you
thousands
learn,
of
it's like,
people coming and going.
yeah.
Yeah.
And you're
Yeah.
like, wait, it's already here. I
Hmm.
just have to be a caretaker and make sure that the things I can do to make it as good as it is and maybe a little better and some fun ideas, some little, sparks of joy or inspiration here and there. Like do what we can, but know that community is happening all around us and name it and celebrate it and make sure there's always an open share and a welcoming to allow people to be able to come and join that community. And I think those are all really key parts. But at the end of the day, it's yeah, we got to keep interacting, keep being willing to connect with each other. And um, I find it like classic, right? Online learning is great, webinars are great, but it's what happens in the chat or what happens in the emails that get exchanged afterwards that really, validates and makes all that education and learning kind of continue on. Anybody watching this, hopefully it's that they reach out to yourself or myself and are able to carry on another conversation and maybe a good connection and a future engagement.
Yeah.
I
And
think that's
that
really where it happens.
absolutely, that community caretaker role. And I haven't heard it often described that way, but I think that is one of the perfect descriptions is recognizing the community that's already there. And sometimes as leaders of volunteers, we come into something where maybe it's not the healthiest organizational culture, but we can
Yeah.
cultivate. And sometimes the gardening metaphor, I come from conservation, so the nature,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
wild lands, natural lands metaphor comes into play of, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
there's already some sort of community there. How can you make it better? How can
Yeah.
you not just make yourself understand, your place in it, your belonging, even if some changes have to occur? But I've found, and it sounds like you've been very successful with the food bank and your other programs, that when you cultivate that spark, we've talked a lot about that spark of motivation and that
Yeah.
spark of connection and that spark of community, that understanding that even if that spark in that community doesn't look like how you've had community before, it's important
Yeah.
to also adapt ourselves to what does this community look
Yeah.
like. Yes, we can encourage change and growth and updates, and whatever is the most recent research helps us make the case for
Yeah.
data driven and human centered results and all the cool buzzwords that are buzzing around right now in the world. But it comes down to that spark of recognition of, we're helpers together, we're in this community
Yeah.
together, we're each other's peers. And whether it's mom at the front desk or a paid staff member at the front desk or a different volunteer at the
Yeah.
front desk, everybody has that core message of how to talk about the agency, how to talk about
Yeah.
the work, the elevator pitch. I think this has been such an important conversation, Adam. I've been we could talk for hours and hours and hours,
True. Mhm.
which is a good problem to have. But I want people to know how to get in touch with you. That and I encourage, I'm a real person, you're a real person. We're not AI, but find connecting with you on LinkedIn. Or are you on any other socials you want to share with folks?
Yeah, LinkedIn's my main playground. I find it's so really great for interaction and engagement. You know, less ads than most other places.
Less ads,
Um,
less slop.
Also, yeah, and always president at VMPC.ca is a great place to reach out if you're looking for any engagement at an association level of anything like that. It's exciting times there as well, and really happy to chat with, especially anybody leading volunteers in Canada. If you have an audience, particular audience up here in Canada about VMPC and how things are going and how we're building towards this new landscape where we need to reinvent how to engage people and foster that longer term, get past that 3 to 5 year mark, and really help people see this as a career because it's one of the best careers I've ever experienced. I'm sure you agree. It's being a journey person in it. And
It is one of the best careers, and I love that we all have different heroic origin stories of how we got into this work. And I love your origin story. And again, we can relate to each other's stories of how we got into being leaders of volunteers and how we support each other. And you don't have to reinvent the wheel. This is a very welcoming and supporting community overall, especially VMPC up there in our neighbors to the north in Canada. Here in the States, I'm beaming in from California, San Francisco right now of Alive, but your local volunteer centers, your local, sometimes called DOVIAs, directors of volunteers and agencies, what are local associations, reach out. And if you're in a part of the world or part of Canada that is much more remote, then there is a great online community to connect to, and all of the benefits that association membership in VMPC has to offer, and training webinars and learning from each other. But thank you so much, Adam, for being on the show today,
of
and
course,
encourage people to find you on LinkedIn and get in touch. And long may you reign at VMPC.
to your term, we,
To
we
your term,
share
to your
we share
term.
the terms and each take our turn to give our best for a short time and pass it on to the next person. But no, it's a great group, and you'll hear lots of great things with the NPC in the years to come for sure.
Absolutely. And plenty of priceless advice today. So thank you so much, Adam. And hope everyone
Thank you.
listening and watching has a great rest of the week and year as well. Take care.